Good afternoon. It's been 6 days since the brutal, wholly unprovoked and unjustified attack by Russia on Ukraine. NATO allies have condemned Russia's invasion of Ukraine in the strongest possible terms. NATO stands with Ukrainians in their battle for their freedom and their destiny. And this battle is taking place in the physical world, but also in cyberspace. Which brings me to the topic of today's discussion on cybersecurity. Cyber was used to shape the Ukrainian environment with cyber attacks and disinformation. It was used to open the attack. It is used to cripple Ukrainian communications and the ability to communicate to the population. It will underpin the entire conflict. It's a point of vulnerability for all of us as we consider our responses. And this illustrates that cyber is on at all times and in all countries. It's a battleground of strategic competition and in some cases conflict. As part of my remarks today, I will address three main themes. First, on the nature of cyber domain and how cyberspace will fundamentally shape our evolving threat landscape. Second, on how we're using NATO as a platform to facilitate consultation and coordinate action among allies and partners. And third, on a new strategic concept for NATO and beyond. So let me start with the threat landscape. Cyberspace is a domain that is always on. For a long time, the dominant narrative was that cyberspace should be treated like the other domains of air, land, sea, and space. Not anymore. There is a growing perception that cyber deterrence may not be the best way to look at the issue. The more we learn about cyberspace, the less compelling it becomes to draw parallels between cyber and other domains. Given that cyberspace is contested at all times, there is constant friction, which means that it may not be possible to deter and defend against all activity. NATO's approach to cyber defense over the last 2 decades has significantly matured. Allies first recognized cyber defense as part of NATO's core task of collective defense in 2014. NATO's first capabilities viewed the cyber domain in the past as primarily a technical issue. Cyber defense is now a core part of NATO's approach to deterrence and defense. Our efforts must keep pace, not only with a dynamic threat landscape, but also with rapid technological change. Our responses must consider this reality and the multitude of state and non-state actors that compound the complexity of the threat environment. Threat actors increasingly seek to destabilize the alliance by employing malicious cyber activities and campaigns below the threshold of armed attack. Throughout 2021, malicious cyber activities have included ransomware incidents targeting various sectors of society, including energy and food. And these trends have continued into 2022, with ransomware incidents disrupting the operations of oil terminals in Belgium, Germany, and the Netherlands, just to name a few in late January. Ransomware should therefore be considered as a matter of national security, and not just a technical or law enforcement issue. NATO is actively responding to these challenges. So how do we do that? Given the evolving threat landscape, NATO has taken significant efforts to respond to these challenges. 7 years after the adoption of NATO's last cyber defense policy, Allied heads of state and government endorsed a new cyber defense policy at their summit in June 2021. The policy reaffirms existing principles that include NATO's defensive mandate and the applicability of international law in cyberspace. Building on this foundation, I would like to highlight 5 key elements that outline how NATO and allies view necessary responses to the systemic competition that we face. First, the constant contest of cyberspace requires a proactive approach. Threat actors increasingly seek to destabilize the alliance by employing malicious cyber activities and campaigns below the threshold of an armed attack. This form of competition blurs the thresholds between peace, crisis, and conflict. NATO's new cyber policy looks more comprehensively below the threshold of Article 5, which is an area that threat actors continuously seek to contest and shape. Second, allies have acknowledged that the impact of significant malicious cumulative cyber activities over time might, in certain circumstances, be considered as amounting to an armed attack. The true strategic consequences of malicious cyber activities may lie not in producing a catastrophic armed attack that disables a country in a single moment. Rather, such consequences may be the result of an accumulation of smaller attacks to undermine the sources of national power. Put simply, a series of lower impact malicious cyber activities or campaigns by the same threat actor can be as destructive as a single cyber attack. Often the question is raised in response to such a statement: when does a cyber attack or campaign of malicious cyber activities cross the threshold for Article 5 to be invoked? So let me be clear on that. The North Atlantic Council will decide on a case-by-case basis whether Article 5 is triggered. In other words, there are no predefined thresholds, nor automaticity of responses. The third element is the nature of cyberspace, which requires a comprehensive approach through a unity of effort at the political, military and technical levels. In line with its defensive mandate, NATO must actively deter, defend against and counter the full spectrum of cyber threats at all times. Responses need to be continuous and draw on elements of the entire NATO toolbox that includes political, diplomatic, economic and military tools. Then on the fourth element, enhanced resilience, including the ability to detect, prevent, mitigate and respond to vulnerabilities and intrusions is critical. Building and maintaining robust and resilient defenses remains the cornerstone of NATO's approach. Allies continue to build on the cyber defense pledge that they adopted in 2016. And 6 years later, we see continued investments in strategies, capabilities and skills. Allies at 30 must work together alongside partners to enhance their resilience to cyber threats and to learn from each other in the process. And here, Italy is playing an active role, and I congratulate the national authorities and their partners for all of your efforts to enhance national cyber resilience, including with the standing up of your national cybersecurity agency. The fifth element is that NATO will play a larger role as a platform for political consultation among allies to uphold the rule-based international order in cyberspace. NATO's core role is to defend its own networks, but NATO will function as a platform to connect and collaborate to compete in the face of differing values. Unacceptable behavior will be called out, and norms of responsible state behavior in cyberspace will be reinforced. Allies are committed to promoting a free, open, peaceful and secure cyberspace. And if necessary, NATO allies will impose cost on those who harm them, and such responses are not limited to cyberspace. One such approach is the imposition of cost through coordinated statements made by NATO and allies. An early example of the 2021 NATO Cyber Defense Policy in action was in July, when the North Atlantic Council issued a statement condemning malicious cyber activities that included the Microsoft Exchange server compromise. NATO issued this statement in solidarity with individual allies as well as partner countries and other organizations such as the EU. And such statements provide a good example of allies calling out unacceptable behavior, and they demonstrate one tool in the alliance's toolbox to respond to malicious cyber activities. By using NATO as a platform, we can work together to enhance our situational awareness, to inform the development of comprehensive response options across the political, military and technical levels. Now finally, let me look at the future. NATO leaders will gather in Madrid this summer to agree on a new strategic concept. NATO and its allies have taken important steps to ensure the alliance is postured to meet these challenges. Looking ahead, cyberspace and the emerging and disruptive technologies it enables will be at the core of systemic competition between states and non-state actors alike. NATO will do its part to ensure that cyberspace remains free, open and secure, now and in the future. And while technology may continuously change, our fundamental values remain the same. It is important to consider cyber defense against the backdrop of broader political and military considerations for the alliance. Future policy development will include the enhancement of NATO as a transatlantic forum for political consultations and joint action. NATO must continue to stand up for the rule-based international order. Cyberspace is a critical part of this. International stability has been challenged in recent weeks. Peace on the European continent has been fundamentally shattered. In Ukraine, alongside kinetic activity, we've seen cyber attacks, like the one on the 14th of January that took down more than a dozen of Ukraine's government websites. The NATO Secretary General has condemned these attacks. 1 month later, to the day, other major cyber attacks followed, taking down multiple Ukrainian government websites and banking services. NATO has worked closely with Ukraine for years to help boost its cyber defenses. Our strong political and practical support for Ukraine will continue, no matter what happens in the days to follow. NATO and allies are also bolstering their resilience in the face of potential malicious cyber activity targeting, in particular, national critical infrastructure. NATO is being used as a platform to enhance situational awareness and to help us all be better prepared to defend and protect ourselves in cyberspace. Allies are sharing national advisories for operators of critical infrastructure, best practices for incident response, and other technical indicators to ensure that our nations are as prepared and resilient as they can be in the face of this serious situation. I would like to thank Italy and other NATO allies for doing their part. This pivotal moment requires collective resolve towards our shared responsibility to secure the future of the alliance. Thank you very much.